So according to the US Foreign Service Institute, Japanese is a Category 5 language for native English speakers, making it one of the hardest languages to learn. I've decided to learn Japanese because not only do I love the culture and want to eventually travel to Japan and be able to speak their language, but I also want to challenge myself and do something difficult. Something that will require a lot of effort and patience, but in the end will be worthwhile. Also, it's cool to be able to watch anime without subtitles. There aren't that many people who can speak Japanese because it's difficult, and that's why most people who decide to learn will eventually give up. Only a small percentage of learners reach advanced fluency. N1 on the JLPT. The JLPT is the Japanese Language Proficiency Test. It's the internationally recognised exam for evaluating Japanese language skills for non-native speakers. It's also what I'll be using to measure my progress from N5 to, well, dare I say it, N1. Now I do want to say that at this moment in time, as I'm planning out this video, I have no idea of what's in store for me. I literally decided to do this a few days ago. I am a complete beginner, starting from scratch. But I'm seeing this as an opportunity to document my language learning journey. I've never learned another language before, and I mean I am choosing one of the hardest ones to learn, and so I expect to make a lot of mistakes along the way. But that's all part of the process, especially when you are teaching yourself. Shh. I assume a lot of people watching these videos are interested in learning themselves, and so seeing someone start from nothing and hopefully make some progress can be inspiring. I also learn better by teaching, and making these videos as I go gives me more of a reason to keep on going. So with all of that being said, let's start learning Japanese. Where do I start? The first thing I did was watch a lot of YouTube videos. I'm not sure why, but a lot of people seem to be in a rush. They want to learn Japanese as quickly as possible, and so a lot of these videos claim that doing it this way or doing it that way will only take a few months. But I was suspicious. Can you really learn Japanese just from watching anime? There's even videos saying that you can learn it in your sleep. Like, I don't know enough yet to confidently say that that's not possible, but I do know that most people like things to be quick and easy. They're always looking for a shortcut. I've taught myself other things in the past, and when you are a complete beginner, it's hard to filter through the bullshit. You don't have the knowledge to be able to say what's right and what's wrong. There is so much content out there, and so many people suggesting different things, you know, it can be overwhelming. I'm not in a rush to learn. I just want to learn the right way, and so I made sure to do my research. I didn't just watch one video, I watched many videos. I read some Reddit posts, found some websites. I even asked ChatGPT, who like most people said to first start by learning Hiragana and Katakana. Okay, what is that? The Japanese writing system is comprised of 3 scripts. These are Hiragana, Katakana and Kanji. For now, I'm going to ignore Kanji and focus on learning Hiragana and Katakana, or the kana for short. This is often referred to as the Japanese alphabet, and so when I first heard that, my English brain was like, okay, I know what the alphabet is, the Japanese must have something similar. But not really. In fact, it's not even an alphabet, it's a syllabary. And if you understand English, you probably know what a syllable is. It's a unit of sound in a word. It's like a beat in how we say words. For example, cat has 1 syllable, water has 2 syllables, and banana has 3 syllables. Each letter in the English alphabet represents a single sound, but each letter, or let's say character, in the Japanese alphabet represents a whole syllable. They're actually referred to as moras, and each kana typically corresponds to 1 mora. When it comes to spelling, you can't just piece together single letters of an alphabet to form a word like we do in English. Instead, words are spelled using the characters, and each of them represents a full syllable, or mora. For example, this character means Su, and this one means she. Put these together and you spell sushi. So instead of spelling letter by letter, you're essentially spelling syllable by syllable. In Japanese, we write a word based on how it sounds, which is actually a lot easier in comparison to spelling English words. There are no individual letters, just sounds that are represented through using these characters. And if that wasn't hard enough, instead of just having one library of characters, there are two libraries of characters. Hiragana and Katakana both have 46 characters, which represents 46 sounds. They are phonetic. We'll discuss this in more detail soon. One of the first things I did was print out a Hiragana and Katakana chart like this. This shows each of the characters laid out in a table, and at either side of the table you can see the sounds they make. The English letters are there for us English speakers to be able to understand the sound these make. It's what is called romaji. Remember, we are not dealing with letters here, just sounds. When I first saw this, I made the mistake of thinking that each of these translated into a corresponding English letter, and that there must be a character that represents each letter of the English alphabet, but it's not that easy. In fact, some English letters and sounds just don't even exist in Japanese. The romaji is there only to help us pronounce the kana, and even then, some of these are pronounced in ways that you might not expect. Again, I'm just reporting what I learn here and trying to explain how I understand this. I'm not an expert, I might be wrong, but one thing I realised right away is that I need to stop trying to draw parallels between this new language and the language that I understand. I find myself making assumptions, trying to directly apply English logic to Japanese. It is interesting to make comparisons, but I need to remind myself that this is a completely different language. So just going back to what I was discussing, there is Hiragana and Katakana. Both of these contain 46 characters. Now it's a shame that they can't just have one or the other, right? Like my first thought was, why do they have to make it harder and have two alphabets or two syllabaries? And then when I found out that Hiragana and Katakana represent the same set of sounds, I was even more confused. Like, it sounds redundant to essentially have two sets of characters to only make the same sound. Wouldn't that just be like having another English alphabet, except the letters are drawn differently? Like, what's the point? Okay, apparently there is a point, and it took me a while to understand. Let me explain. Although Hiragana and Katakana share the same sounds, they each have a different function. I read that it's kind of like using bold or italics in English, where the meaning doesn't change but the purpose or style does. I'm probably not the best person to explain this because at this moment in time I'm still trying to wrap my head around this myself, but hopefully with more time and exposure I'll begin to understand why both of these need to exist. When looking online, I found that the most common explanation is that hiragana is primarily used for native Japanese words and grammatical purposes. It's also used for words for which there are no kanji. It provides a way to clearly express Japanese phonetics and is essential when reading and writing. Katakana, whilst it represents the same sounds as hiragana, is used mainly for foreign words, onomatopoeia, scientific terms, and sometimes used for emphasis. It helps distinguish these foreign words, often referred to as loanwords, from the native vocabulary. Now, I'm the type of person who likes to understand the bigger picture. I like to know the purpose of things, why it is the way that it is. Especially when I'm learning something, I need to know why I'm learning it. But with something like this, I think I just need to accept it for now and hope that eventually it will make sense. One question that just kept playing on my mind was, if hiragana and katakana are two versions of the same set of sounds, then surely it's possible to spell every word using only one or the other. And according to ChatGPT, you can technically spell almost any Japanese word using only one script, but you don't do that. Why? Well, because Japanese writing is not just about pronunciation, it's also about meaning, context, and visual clarity. If you were to only use one script, then you'd lose clarity.
Huh?
Apparently, Japanese kids start off by learning hiragana due to it being the simplest, most consistent part of their writing system. It's the same as learning your ABCs. We start off with learning the alphabet in lowercase letters before then learning more about capital letters, punctuation, and grammar. Although anything written in lowercase letters with no punctuation can probably be understood, it's not practical. And neither is using only one script, such as hiragana, and so they gradually learn katakana and kanji. So, to clarify, just like English needs lowercase, uppercase, punctuation, spelling, and paragraphs, Japanese needs hiragana, katakana, kanji, grammatical particles, and sentence structure. Without these, you can only express very simple, limited things, like a child. For now, I'm going to be focusing on hiragana and katakana. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm making this video as I go, and at the time of writing this, I am in the process of learning both hiragana and katakana, and I have decided to learn them both at the same time. It's not uncommon to just start with hiragana and then learn katakana, but seeing as they both share the same sounds, I decided to learn them in pairs, which is also something that I've seen other people recommend. Now there are many ways you can approach this, but I'm going to explain how I'm doing it because it's going quite well. I think it's going to take me at least a week to get to a stage where I can look at any of these characters and instantly know what it says and also how to say it, because that's equally, if not more important, being able to pronounce these. So initially I had printed out this chart which presents all 46 hiragana and katakana along with the romaji. The vowel only sounds are along the top, and the rest of these are consonant sounds with each of the 5 vowel sounds, excluding the N, which is a consonant only sound. The reason I had printed this out was so that I could learn through not only copying this chart and writing out each of the characters, but also my plan was to cover up the romaji and try to memorize each row before moving on to the next one. But I found this to be a little impractical. I've watched a lot of videos now, and there's a YouTuber named Trenton the Penguin who says that there's not really much point on focusing too much on writing when these days most people just rely on typing. And that's true, like, unless I choose to, I don't really have to write anything by hand these days, and the same applies to this. Like, I'm not looking for a shortcut, okay? I'm looking for the most efficient and practical way to learn. I want to approach all of this in order of importance, and so trying to learn the stroke order and write out each of the kana as accurately as possible was taking a lot of time. So eventually I decided to just focus on reading and speaking, and I can always go back and learn how to write these when I'm more familiar with the characters that I'm writing. This is when I started to make some real progress, because I soon learned about mnemonics. Mnemonics are essentially memory tricks like stories or small visual cues that helps to retain and recall what it is you are looking at. For example, the ones that I came across were the mnemonic charts by Tofugu. I think that's how you pronounce his name. But there's one for hiragana and katakana, and each of these 46 characters are shown alongside a mnemonic. For instance, A in hiragana actually has the letter A within it, and the same applies to the equivalent katakana. Some of these are quite funny and random as well, but I found that they actually helped me remember them more. Our brain remembers stories and pictures better than abstract symbols, and I'm definitely a visual learner, so all of this was very valuable. I printed out both of these charts and also found a really useful video by With Taka, who explains how each of these are pronounced. In combination with these two things, I used a site called Kana, and this is what I used to repeatedly quiz myself until I was getting it right. The site refers to this as brute forcing, where you just try and try again until it sticks, and that's exactly what happened for me. I'll link all of these resources in the description. Now, I didn't just try to memorize all 92 characters in one go, instead I approached it one step at a time. I began with the first row, A, I, U, E, O. I can't tell you how many times I've been saying that recently, but it's a good job I live on my own. I was always rewinding with Taka's video to make sure that I was pronouncing these correctly. The good thing about this site is that you can select which kana you want to include in the quiz. If you're starting from scratch, there is the brute force mode, which takes you through stages, introducing you to a new set of kana each time. The only thing I wasn't able to do when doing it this way was select both Hiragana and Katakana at the same time. So I just selected the free mode, added the first 5 for Hiragana and then the first 5 for Katakana, and then it takes all of these, mixes them up in a random order, and when it shows you a character, you have to enter the correct romaji. Every time a character popped up, I would also say it out loud. Of course, I don't get all of this right the first time. When I got stuck on one that I couldn't remember, I would just look at the mnemonic chart and then I'd be like, ah, okay, so that one is the exotic bird laying eggs. I just kept on doing this quiz until I was getting them all right, and even then, I would do it again to see how quick I could go. Once I was confident with that group, I would move on to the next group, but I didn't just stop learning the previous one. Instead, I just added these new characters into the quiz along with the kana that I already knew. This meant that I was continuing to reinforce my memory of all of them. And I also had an app on my phone called Kana. It meant that throughout the day, I could just open it up and quiz myself. As I am writing this, I'm around halfway. I'm able to get 100% on quizzes that include half of all the Hiragana and Katakana, and as I said, by the end of the week, I want to be getting 100% on all 92 characters, and also be able to pronounce them correctly. So I'll update you then. Okay, so after another day of practice, I can confidently read all 46 basic Hiragana and Katakana characters. When I test myself on the site, there is still some that I have to think about, but the mnemonics really help, like to the point where when I see a lot of these now, I just think of the mnemonic more than the meaning of the character. But I suppose that's the point, right? I would like to be able to recognise these with less of a delay, but I think that will come with time. There are some of these characters which look very similar, like shi, n, tsu, so. The only difference is being that the longer lines on some are more horizontal and that the little lines are also at different angles. These smiley faces took a lot of practice. Other characters also look similar, like not, met, nu, or fu, wa, and u. But with time, I was able to easily tell these apart. In terms of pronunciation, what caused me a bit of trouble at first was the characters shi, chi, and tsu. I assumed it was a rather simple system where the consonants would just be added to the start of these vowels. And whilst that's the case for most of these, there are some exceptions. There's always exceptions. What I thought might have been si is actually shi, ti is chi, and tu is tsu, like tsunami. These are tricky to pronounce and I'm still probably getting it wrong. But what's even harder to pronounce is the R column. A native English speaker like myself would look at this and think, ah, okay, ra, ri, ru, re, ro. But a Japanese speaker would say something more like
ra, ri, ru, re, ro.
What? That's more like an L than an R, or it's like both of them together. The R sound in Japanese is quite different from any sound in English. It involves tapping your tongue against the roof of your mouth just behind your upper teeth. It's more like la, li, lu, le, lo. Please don't judge. Now that I can read the kana, what I've decided to do is print off these writing sheets created by Tai Kim, not solely for the purpose of learning how to write them, but more so to help me remember these without the romaji. Like if someone was to tell me the romaji, I'd like to be able to instantly recall and write down the corresponding hiragana and katakana, or vice versa. It's only taken me a few days to get to this point, and I don't want to move on too quickly until I've really cemented this into my brain. So it turns out that I haven't been using these writing sheets that much, but they've been very useful for learning the stroke order. The way that I have been learning this is just by writing out the romaji and then trying to remember each of the characters for these, both hiragana and katakana. If I get it wrong or can't remember, then I just check what it looks like. I've just been writing these out many times throughout the day. Again, I'm not tackling all of them at once, I'm just going through one row at a time. What I've found is that I can easily read these, but when trying to write them, I can't remember what the characters look like. I'm not going to get too hung up on perfecting the stroke order, I just want to get close enough at this stage. The good thing about the kana is that you see it everywhere, and so naturally I should become very familiar with it. Also, now might be a good time to mention dakten and handakten. So far, I've been ignoring these, but they certainly need to be learnt. These two small marks, which look like double quotation marks, are added to certain kana to change their pronunciation, usually making them voiced, which means your vocal cords vibrate as you produce these sounds. K becomes G, ga, gi, gu, ge, go. S becomes Z, za, ji, zu, ze, zo. T becomes D, da, ji, zu, de, do. And H becomes B, ba, bi, bu, be, bo. I'm still getting used to saying these. It's not hard to remember, but there are some exceptions, of course, like she and chi are both pronounced G with dakten. In addition to dakten, there is also handakten, which is the small circle. These are only added to the H columns and turns the H into a P. Pa, pi, pu, pe, po. It's just something that you have to look out for, and it takes a bit of getting used to. The site that I was using lets you include kana with dakten and handakten, so I also started doing that. Now after learning all of that, I thought that I had finally finished learning the kana. But then I learn about yun. This is when the characters ya, yu, or yo are combined with consonants. In writing, the ya, yu, or yo is shown to be smaller. For example, you can take ki and combine it with ya to get kya, combine it with yu to get kyu, or combine it with yo to get kyo. You get the point. It's very important to blend these sounds together so that they become one sound. Again, there are some exceptions. She and chi, when combined with ya, yu, or yo, becomes sha, shu, sho, cha, chu, cho. Now it's important to remember that by adding a dakten to she and chi, they both become ji. Adding ya, yu, or yo to this will mean that these are now pronounced jia, ju, or jio. And it's important to realise that you can combine ya, yu, or yo with other kana that involves a dakten or a handakten to create more sounds. But it's all the same principle. It sounds more complicated than it actually is. I got to the point where I was adding all of the kana into this quiz, and although I still had to think about some of these, the dakten, the handakten and the yun combinations were easy to understand. They still involve all of the same characters that I had already learned. In terms of writing, I still have a few more to learn. I'm not sure how essential it is to be able to do this, but it certainly helps to become more familiar with these characters. At this stage, I can confidently say that I've learned the kana. On the same site that I've been using to quiz myself, there's even a word mode. Kana is chained together to form words. Obviously at this moment in time, I have no idea what these words mean, unless it's a foreign loanword written in katakana. It's quite satisfying to be able to guess how these words are pronounced. There's a video by Japanese Podcast 101 in which they teach hiragana, and in this video they also show some words which I would try to guess through reading the characters. I would always get close but never exact, there's still clearly a lot of work to be done. Also, when I was practicing using the word mode, I was doing quite well just entering in the corresponding romaji for most of these. That was until a word like this popped up. This means bed. It's written in katakana. When I came to read this, I said, okay, there's he with a handakten, which means bet. There's tsu, and then there's to with a dakten, which means do. That wasn't right. Apparently, the romaji is bedo. So where the hell is the tsu? And it was at this moment when I realised that I had to learn more about grammar. But that's a subject that I'll save for another video. Also, from what I've seen, there's so much to it, I have a lot to learn. In terms of my next steps, I'm certainly going to learn more about grammar. I'll probably learn some kanji, and I want to also expand my vocabulary at the same time using tools such as Anki and Yomitan, which I'll talk more about in the next video. For now, I hope you have enjoyed this and possibly even learnt something yourself. Like I say, I'm not only doing this to document my own language learning journey, but also to help others along the way. With that being said, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.